Hey, I'm Tag, Kyla here. Thought today I would bring you a topic that's probably not talked about enough. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people think that they know a lot about pitch calling. Same thing, players. I think they just sometimes back out on that. They find themselves in a position that they don't have to make those kind of decisions, so they don't ever think about it. What I've seen a lot whenever it comes to pitch calling strategies is a lot of players feel like they want to throw something different or see something, but don't really know how to relay it into a coach. And so then you get a lot of confrontation sometimes of just, why aren't we throwing that pitch, or I'm seeing it, or I know it. And sometimes I find that if pitchers knew a little bit more about where the hitter was in the box, or the type of swing that they were putting forth, or the defense, where they lined up, and those kind of things, I think that could really help them not win some arguments, because we're not trying to be confrontational on that, but present their reasoning for wanting to throw a certain pitch or something that they're seeing or feeling, and having better communication between the pitch caller and the player, if the player's not calling those pitches. I did in college have the opportunity to, myself and my catcher called pitches exclusively. That was a time when that was something that happened, which can definitely be overwhelming sometimes, and it's easy to fall into some routines and some ruts. I've seen a lot of things get predictable at times. I really enjoy pitch calling, and I like to watch what other people do for their setups and things like that. And I find that sometimes when we miss some of those moments of playing that chess game, that little mind game about what pitch to throw when, we're missing those opportunities to really increase a pitcher's strikeouts. They don't have to have amazing pitches to keep hitters guessing, and sometimes we just get a little too predictable in that, and we see pitcher strikeouts go down because of it. So those are some of the reasons why I wanted to bring this to you today. Hopefully at some point, as a player, you will understand this a little bit more. It definitely is more for a little bit more intermediate or advanced. You need to have more pitches to kind of play with a little bit more of these hitters in these situations. I will post this sheet probably in the comment sections, because Facebook on group doesn't let you do videos and photos at the same time. But I'll give you a photo of it here just so you can kind of look at it really quickly. So those are all the things we're going to cover really fast. I'm trying to keep this video short for you guys, but the first thing that you want to do whenever you are making decisions, if you've never played a team, in college it's really easy. We have scouting reports. We have usually a coach on the staff whose entire job is to gather scouting reports, watch film, write notes down, see people play, so that the team is prepared for the entire week on the opponent that's coming up. You guys usually do not have that opportunity, right? A lot of times, sometimes you might know the team from previous times, but most of the time it's a random draw. You don't know who you get, and sometimes it depends on if somebody wins or loses. So first thing you want to do whenever you're making a decision about pitch calling is you want to look where a hitter is in the box. There's a few things that we kind of look for, and then the pitch that goes with it. I also, when I wrote this and I present on this a few times, I don't do a specific pitch very rarely, because we don't have to have a type of pitch in order to get people out. We don't need a rise ball if you've never thrown a rise ball. There's other things that can work in that situation. So if you have a hitter who is starting in the front of the box, that means they are in front of the plate. We want to bring anything that's our fastest pitch. No matter what, we want the fastest pitch that we throw to really upset the timing of that hitter when they're up in the front of the box. Now, if the hitter goes to the back of the box, they go all the way behind the plate. We want to do something that's our best breaking pitch. We want something that has the most movement, because they've put themselves in a position being back to be sometimes in those break zones. So you really want to increase swings and misses when they're in the back of the box in that position. They have a closed stance. What we mean by closed, that means their front foot is more towards the plate than their back foot. So they've closed themselves off, making their hips more difficult to rotate. You want to throw an inside pitch. Whatever you can do at that position to put that ball more inside on them, because they're not going to have very fast hips when they put themselves in that spot in the box. And versus an open stance. So when you have a hitter who has an open stance, that means that front foot is out farther away from their back foot towards the plate. You want to throw something that's your best outside pitch. So anything that we can throw at that time. If you find a pitcher with both feet really tight onto the plate, we want to throw inside pitches. And if we have a pitcher who is way off the plate, we want to throw outside pitches. So let's say the hitter stood in the box and you threw your first pitch. You've got a chance to see them swing, which as a pitcher and as a catcher and as a coach, you should be looking first where they sit in the box. That's one of my first notes I write on my scouting reports. And the second thing that I write is what their swing looked like. You know, where did their hands go? What did their body do? You know, what were their feet doing when they were swinging? Because that's the next decision that you're going to use in your process after you've already thrown that first pitch and you know where their stance is. So when we're talking about a hitter's swing, if their hands are really high up in the zone, we want to throw a low pitch. It's going to be harder for them to get their hands down and swing onto that plane. And if vice versa, if they have their hands really set up low, we want to throw something that's higher. We're going to have a tendency for them to have to come out of that position to then try to swing. If you see that their hands are really far away from their body, we want to throw something that's inside, that it's going to have to make them cut off that path to get towards it. And if you see that they have a slow swing, just in general, their hands are slow, they're not very fast, we want to throw our fastest pitch or, again, an inside pitch. Now, if you see a hitter who has a really quick swing, you see them as soon as it goes, they have some good barrel. Sometimes it even makes you take a step back. You're like, whoo, she swung on that one. You want to make sure that's where we're bringing in if you have a changeup or anything outside, because you're going to mess with their timing of when they're in the swing zone. If they have an inside out swing, that means they start in and then push their ball away or push their hands away from their body. We want to do something low and we want to do something inside if possible. If you have low and inside, then obviously that's your best case scenario. If you see them take an upward swing, so they really collapse trying to get a whole lot of launch angle, but they're not very good with their barrel when they're doing that, we want to throw something that they're going to swing at in a high pitch. So anything that's more elevated in the zone as much as we can. You do have to be careful with that, right? Because if they're in the same plane as that, so you do have to look at where that barrel comes through the zone for them and make sure that you're breaking above that. And vice versa, if they have a really down swing, especially if you hear the coach telling them to hit the ball on the ground whenever they're trying to take that severe angle to put the ball in play, we want to throw a low pitch. Those barrels aren't going to match up with your ball path if you're throwing something low. If you have a hitter who steps out when they swing, so that instead of stepping towards a pitcher, they pull their front foot out towards third, you definitely want to try to throw, you can throw something outside for them, or you can do change of speeds. And then same thing if they step in. So if they step towards the plate, you want to throw something inside on them. You want to catch them, hopefully timing-wise, that when they're stepping and swinging, that's when that ball is crossing the plate. Same thing on the step in, they're going to have that ball breaking into them, makes it a little bit harder to be on time for those kind of things. And if you see a hitter double step, that means they take a step and then take another step. They're very off time in that position. You want to throw change up, or you want to throw something low in the zone. If you have, now we're going on to game situations. Okay, so let's say we've got their swing down, we've got themselves in the stance down. We know those two things. We're set up for that one. We have to make sure that we're dealing with the situation. Sometimes we can just throw to the hitter and not worry about that situation, especially when we're up in the game. We have a lot of runs, or it's maybe not a game that feels as important, or you're trying to work on something early in the season. But whenever we are in a spot that this matters, game situation pitching trumps some of those other things. So one of the things you have to look at is a runner at one. If you're in a bunt situation, we want to throw a high pitch or even a low pitch with lots of velocity. I find that hitters sometimes practice hitting high pitches a lot, so if I see them looking really well at their barrel angle when they're trying to bunt, then I challenge them to try to hit low and in, because that's a really severe position to try to tilt to, and a lot of them haven't worked on that. More coaches tend to work on bunting high pitches instead of low pitches. And then if you have runner at two and less than 2 outs, we want to throw anything low inside. We want to keep that ball to the left side of the field. Hopefully your defense matches up with that, and that you can keep that runner from advancing. And if you have runner at 3 with less than 2 outs, we want to throw that low in or low out pitch, again trying to keep the ball in the infield. And if you have a pitcher who can throw high in, challenge that hitter on that situation, because they're going to be swinging really big. So if you can get them to swing at something and chase something that maybe they shouldn't, we can get an easy pop up to the infield. If you have bases loaded, this is one of those situations I always say, no matter what, throw your pitcher's best pitch. And it's your pitcher's best pitch that they are currently have in the game, in the inning, right then, that matches up. So don't overthink that one right there. If you know that even if it's a pitch that's maybe not their best pitch all the time, but that's the best pitch today, that's one we want to go with in that situation. Don't want to walk in a run, ever. If we're ahead in the count, we want to throw to our pitcher's strike zone. So things that look like strikes and end up being balls. And then if we're behind in the count, we want to throw to the umpire's strike zone. We want to make sure that we're putting the ball exactly where he wants it. We don't want him to have to change his opinion on a thing. We don't want to be begging for our pitches to be his pitches. We want to know exactly what he throws, and that's what we want to go with. And then if you find that they're doing a lot of hitting and running on you, we want to do something high and in, or we want to do something low and in. Something that's on the inside that's going to be a little harder when they're swinging away and they're trying to move their runner to hit and run on. Now you've got to watch missing that pitch in the middle, because those things can definitely have some bat meat ball positions. But if you can challenge them enough on that, that's not where usually the side of the field where they're trying to do something to. Okay, so here we go. We've had our hitter stance, we have our swing, and we've got our game situation covered. Now let's talk about defense, because this is something that sometimes needs to be in the back of our mind as players and even as coaches who are listening to this, is if we have the left side of the field that is really weak, we need to work away from that position. The last thing you want is to keep pitching to the side of the field that is not making very many outs that day. And then same thing, if you have the right side of the field is weak, we're going to go with those inside pitches. If your infield is weak, this happens to us sometimes. Some people get hurt or some people get shifted around. You want to make sure you're starting to elevate things a little bit and throw more changeups. That way, if they're hitting balls in the infield, they're going to be easier. They're not going to be as shots or as fast of a ball. And then hopefully the ball's going to start getting in the air, or even to your outfield, who is a much better, hopefully at that position, who can make the outs for you. Now, let's say you have an outfield that's weak. You want to really work at keeping the ball down in the zone. The last thing you want is one of those little flares or something like that a normal outfielder or an outfield would be able to handle, and something falls in that shouldn't have, or somebody misreads a ball because you tried to stick a pitcher in right field or something like that. And this is one of the times that I write a specific pitch. If you have a pitcher who is tired, you really want to stay away from rise balls and curve balls later in the day, and later when they get their legs not behind them and their arm speed and their hips start getting off in timing. That's one of the things you really want to watch. They should have more than just those two pitches to go to, and you need to make sure that you're kind of aware of that too, that you're not trying to overthrow them in that, because those pitches are going to end up being flat a lot more. And then if you have a pitch that's not working, that happens to a lot. Make sure that we're using it still, because I don't ever let pitchers not throw something, but let's use it sparingly. The last thing you want to do is beat a dead horse on that one, but we also don't want to give them that moment where we say, oh, it's not good, we're not throwing it at all. As a pitcher, that's not okay to do. If something's not working, we want you to go to the bullpen and work on that pitch and get it ready or get it better. But we will hopefully, be a little bit more aware of that. Still call it, because you can't start eliminating things. We sometimes don't have enough to eliminate, but we want to make sure that we're using it sparingly. And the last part of your decision making when you're looking at things, and this is something I do as a coach, and I always did as a player before the game, I always kind of walked the field. I knew what conditions, I always checked the weather. I knew what conditions I was going to be playing in that day. So if you have fences that are really short, they're under, or they're that 3 feet height, they're not that 6 foot, 7 foot, 8 foot fence. You want to make sure that you're keeping things low in the zone. You want to throw low pitches. If you have a really long fence, one of those really deep ones, go ahead and back your outfield up and let those pitches go ahead with your high pitches, and see if you can get kids that pop up all day long because they're not making adjustments. If you have a wet field, this is one of those things, sometimes you have to make sure that you do elevate to keep balls in the air, so that outfielders are throwing dry balls. You're making sure that you can keep the ball off the ground as much as possible, because you're going to make a lot more mistakes when it's a wet ball, especially if you haven't practiced with it. When you have humidity high and you have low altitude, we want to make sure we're throwing change, curve, screw. We want to be mixing things in that's going to be a little bit flatter in that position. And if you have humidity low and high altitude, We want to throw drop. We want to throw pitcher strike zone pitches like curves and screws or change-ups. We want to keep balls in different positions based on your humidity and your altitude, because those two things do play a factor in that one. When you have your wind to your back, you want to make sure you're throwing your fastest pitch. You can definitely throw high pitches at that time. And when you have your wind to your face, you want to make sure you're trying to keep the ball down, because that wind is going to take things out a little bit. So hope that helps. Again, I will post this just a little bit. Wanted you guys to have some of this information. I know there's so much good stuff coming and content out from everybody across the world, but I did really feel it was important for my MTAG pitchers and, you know, some of you parents who are coaches and stuff like that to have a little bit more knowledge and start teaching your pitcher. Where were they in the box? You know, what their swing looked like? What was the coach telling the defense to do? Or what was the coach yelling at the hitter? And, you know, which side of your field is better? You can really help them start being students of the game and learning about calling pitches and thinking about that chess game that's going on between them and the hitter a little bit more, just by learning some of those things. So I will definitely post this. Hope everything's still going well. I'm sure we're still trying to find things to clean and do and cook and have a good time. So hope everybody's staying safe and enjoying this time and making the most of it. Take care. Bye.